Hi there, welcome to the YouTube channel. We're back again. Today's going to be the kickoff of a irregular series I'm going to do here on the YouTube channel. I think I've said over several videos now that I play mainly for Commander nowadays. I mainly play on MTGO. And as we know, there's been a bit of a backlog of commanders and cards being added to MTGO over the years. Now, the wonderful people at Daybreak Games have, every so often when they do an update, like what's happened with Avatar that's released this week, they try and cover some of the backlog cards and add them into MTGO so people can play them and experience them like they would do in paper. So there's been quite a few legends over the last few years, and one of my moderators asked me to cover one of the cards that got added this time, and I thought, that's quite interesting. I can actually do a whole sort of like YouTube playlist based on the backlog commanders going forward. So every so often when I get a bit of spare time, I'll pick up one of the legends that's been added, and then I'll do a video that's purely based on a deck you could play on MTGO. And that's all that said, kicking off today, what we're going to be looking at is Zask, Skittering Swarmlord, 3 and double green for a 5/5 insect. It says you may play lands and cast insect spells from your graveyard. And whenever another insect you control dies, put it on the bottom of its owner's library. You then mill 2 cards. And then you can pay 1 in either green or black to give target insect +1/+0 and death touch until the end of turn. It's an interesting one. There's been quite a few insect commanders over the years. Zask is definitely the biggest one that I remember coming out for a long time. So I thought, well, I've been asked to look at this, so let's have a go at it and see if we can do this little series. So here we go. Here's what today's deck really does look like. So, because we're into insects, there's only one planeswalker we could include, and that's Grist the Hunger Tide. I'm sure you all know by now that when this is in the graveyard, it counts as an insect, so you can actually, use Zask to replay the planeswalker from the graveyard, and then you can +1 to get a 1/1 insect, and then mill a card, and if you mill an insect that way, you get to repeat the process. It's all good. Sack a creature, destroy target creature or planeswalker for -2 or -5. Each opponent loses life equals the number of creature cards in your graveyard. That's fine. But it's just the fact that we can actually just play it back again and again with our Zask when we have Zask in play. Makes it playable today. We have a lot of creatures, 32. Most of them insects, but some aren't. Obviously, Birds of Paradise here to help us ramp. And then we've got Gist, the voracious larvae, is in as well. Obviously, when this enters, when Gist, the vicious larvae, or another creature enters from your graveyard, you can pay an additional green, and then you can transform this, which transforms into another version of our favourite planeswalker. +1, you get to create a 1/1 black-green insect creature token, mill 2 cards, and put a death touch counter on the token if a black card was milled this way. -2, you get to pull up an artifact or enchantment, or -6. For each creature card in your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 black and green insect creature token. Yeah. Well, whatever. But, another way of milling our stuff into our graveyard so we can play it with Zask over here. From there, we go to the Haywire Mite to take out those annoying non-artifact, non-creature enchantments. And then Malt Tenderer comes in. We can mill cards with this. It's an insect itself, so it benefits from some of the synergies we've got coming up. And if a push, we can exile a card from our graveyard to add 1 mana of any colour. The Brood Spinner's in, enters, we surveil 2, and then we can sacrifice it for 6 mana at some stage, 4 and green and black at some stage, and create a number of 1/1 black insect creature tokens with flying equal to the number of card types in your graveyard. So, yeah, okay. Krill, the Whip Creep Cracker's in as well, just take out those annoying tokens our opponents may have. Seaship Brewtender comes in, mills 3 when it enters, and then another one you can sacrifice off at some stage to return a creature or graveyard or spacecraft card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's only going to be creatures in this deck, I'll be honest. And then we needed some way of sort of like keeping the game going. So we've got a few ways of sacrificing insects, if you've already seen. So Vengeful Blood Witch, so we can basically make someone lose 1 and we gain 1. Then we've got Virus Beetle to make each opponent discard something. Web Strike Elite gives a little bit of a reach. It's a 3/3 insect archer for 2 green mana. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. The cycling ability is quite nice, so we need to blow up a load of artifacts and enchantments as well. From there, Zulaport Cutthroat, because again we're going to be sacrificing our creatures off, so we might as well have everyone lose 1 and us gain 1 every time we do. And then we have Blex, the Vexing Pest. Now, this is an insect, but it does give all our insects a little bit of a pump with +1/+1. And when Blex, the Vexing Pest, dies, we gain 4 life. We can also cast it if we need to at the search for Blex as well, where we get to go and look at the top 5 cards of our library, put any number of them into our hand, the rest into our graveyard. But we lose 3 life for every card we put in our hand this way. So, bit of a double-edged sword, big time. Hornet Nest, no-brainer. Let's have this take a load of damage and get a whole load of 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. Nantuko Elders in because A, it ramps, and B, it's an insect. Old Rustine makes an appearance because we like milling cards. Yeah. And if we mill lands, we get treasures. If we mill creatures, we get insects. And if we mill anything that isn't either of those two, we get a blood token. That's fine. The Scarring Swarm comes in from the Edge of Eternity's Commander decks. When we sack a land, create a tapped token that's a copy of this creature if there are 7 more lands in your graveyard. Otherwise, create a tapped 1/1 black insect creature token with flying. From there, we go to the Scoot Swarm. Now, I am playing this on MTGO, but I'm just going to put a little warning out now. Sometimes Scoot Swarm does cause MTGO to crash, and it is really good because you like the landfall triggers, you like having the extra insects, and having copies of Scoot Swarm is good fun. But just be warned that if you go too heavy on this, you might cause MTGO to crash. Fair warning. Sedgemoor Witch is in to give us those insects when, well, pest creatures basically when we cast our instant sorceries. Just another little way of gaining some life if we need to. Spineseeker Centipede lets us go and find one of the basics and put it in our hand, and then the Delirium's quite nice because, you know, +1/+2 and Vigilance is, you know, makes it into a 3/3 for 3 mana, so that's bearable. From 40k, Canopatek Scarab Swarm is in as well. Now, this is probably the most expensive card on MTGO in the deck. I haven't gone with Gaia's Cradle or anything else. But just be warned, this one is around about 5.5 tickets at the moment, so you may want to think about it if you haven't got one from the 40k cards already. But it is very good because you can exile someone's graveyard, and then for each artifact or land card exiled this way, you do get an insect artifact creature token with flying. So just bear in mind, but 4 mana, it's really nice. Fumulus, the Infestation, is also in. Whenever a player sacrifices a non-token creature, we get an insect, and whenever an insect, slug, worm, leech attacks, we basically defending player loses a life and we gain a life. So that gives a little bit more power to our little 1/1 guys. Ice Till Explorer, I forgot was an insect when I was building the deck, and it wasn't until I searched on my collection on MTGO to find insects this one came out. A great way of milling our stuff, and we can play all our lands from our graveyard again, so let's go with that. The Rot Farm Mortipede is also in. Basically, it turns in, it's a 4 mana, fairly poor 3/4 creature, but whenever 1 or more creature cards leave our graveyard, Rotfarm Mortipede gets +1/+0 and gains menace and lifelink till the end of turn. So from that point of view, it's actually really quite nice. The Swarm Weaver, although it's a scarecrow, comes in because it creates insects, and it also pumps our insects as long as we've got Delirium. Vindictive Vampire is just another way for us to basically deal damage to opponents and gain life when we lose our creatures. Amza, the Swarm's Hunger, one of the other cards that's been added in fairly recently. Flying and Menace gives all our insects menace, and then whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you may create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token, and then put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the greatest mana value amongst those cards. Only once a turn, but you know, it helps. Mazarek, Cruel Death Priest, also makes an appearance. Whenever a player sacks a permanent, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control, so your army gets big quickly. Achak, Emerald Aradian is also in from the, wherever it was, can't remember the name of the set now. Completely gone from my head. But when it enters, you get a 1/1 green insect creature token for each artifact and creature card in our graveyard. And whenever an insect dies, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Achak, and each opponent loses a life. Yeah, okay then. Another one that isn't an insect but makes us insects is Izona, the Thousand-Eyed. And as a battlefield, we get to create a 1/1 black-green insect creature token for each creature card in our graveyard. Then we get to sack creatures off and gain a life and draw a card. No brainer next, the Hornet Queen, because who doesn't want a whole load of flying, death-touching dudes? The Molegraft Monstrosity is just fun. I put it in for a little bit of a laugh with the trample side effect of it, and then when it exiles, return 2 target creature cards at random from your graveyard to the battlefield. Hopefully you've got some good choices when it dies. Finally, because we want to make as many insects as possible, the living hives in just to chuck out even more when it gets in for the combat damage. Last 2 cards, a little bit expensive for what they do, but they're good fun and they fit in quite well with the typal deck we're building today. Sorceries, well, Farseek, Life from the Throne, because we can dredge this back and mill cards and get more things to play with Zask that way in our graveyard. Nature's Law, 3 visits for the ramp. Toxic Deluge for the control side of things. Victimize, because we can sack one of our insect tokens at some stage and get back 2 of the creatures that we need in play. Permanent creatures, obviously. Culling Ritual just gives us a whole load of mana boost every so often. Damnation helps us control the board. And then Swarmlord Massacre from the Bloomberg Commander decks. Create 2 squirrels. Okay, then each creature that isn't an insect, rat, squirrel, or spider gets -1/-1 until the end of turn. For each creature you control that's an insect, rat, spider, or squirrel. Yes, it will kill some of your non-insect creatures off, I'm aware of that, but the control side of it is so good at 5 mana, it's silly. Artifacts wise, well, Elixir of Immortality is here to stuff everything back in when it goes pear-shaped as usual. Then Soul Ring, an Arcane Signet, Talisman for ramp. And then, if we want to mill our opponents out or someone, we can sack our creatures off to do it this way. We need some sack outlets, so I went with 3 fairly classic ones. So Altar of Dementia to mill people, Ashnod's Altar to give us colourless mana, and Phyrexian Altar to give us coloured mana. So, yay. Enchantment wise though, gets even more fun. There's 14 enchantments in the deck, which is a lot for me, I'm aware of that. But Dredge's Insight gains us life when our artifacts or creature cards leave our graveyard. Yep. And we get to mill 4 when this comes in as well. So, and you gain a life because you return one of the creatures or lands or artifacts from the milled cards to your hand. Meat Hook Massacre gives us away another way of controlling the board. Bastion of Remembrance, we all love this one. Obviously, when our creatures die, if one loses one, we gain one. Bioengineered Future gives us a way of pumping up our creatures every so often. When we've got a turn where we can play a whole load of cards, we've got the land, a token, or we've played one of the lands that sacrifices itself. Pumps up our creatures with a +1/+1 counter, so it's nice. Cemetery Tampering is just fun. It's another way of milling cards every turn, and because we're not worried about having our graveyard filled up, unless someone plays like Bajuka Bog or something similar, this just gives another way of getting another creature into play off the hideaway side of things. Crawling Infestation is fun. Beginning your upkeep, you may mill 2 cards. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard, this way you get an insect token. Triggers once a turn. Likewise, Crawling Sensation, however, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere for the first time each turn, put a 1/1 green insect creature token onto the battlefield. Yeah, not quite sure why they printed 2 cards that are virtually identical, but hey, we'll deal with it in this deck, definitely. Growing Rights Vittelmox here, just so we can go and find the creatures and then eventually get our Persuado Gaia's Cradle. Journey to Eternity is just fun. It gives us a little bit of protection if our legendary commander gets removed. We can just let it die, go to the graveyard, return it, and then the journey transforms into our 38th land when we get there. 37th? Might be the 37th, can't remember. But anyway, gives us another way of bringing back creatures from our graveyard to the battlefield. The Sigil of Merkel comes in. Beginning of combat in our turn, we get to mill a card. When you do, if there are 4 more cards in your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control against Death Touch. Obviously, because of the insects we're creating, we had to have Parallel Lives in, and Doubling Season for that matter. They're both here. Zothera, the Super Void, is also in. Coming from Age of Eternities. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent chooses a creature they control and exiles it. And at the beginning of your end step, if a player controls no creatures, sacrifice this and then put a creature card exiled with it onto the battlefield under our control with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Yeah, okay, like that plan. Finally, just so we can mill, it's 37th land. Finally, so we can mill a lot of stuff. Deadbridge Chant is in just because, and then we get to return a creature, choose a card at random. If it's a creature card, battlefield, otherwise it goes in our hand. That's fine, got no issues with that. Black and green lands all the way through the side of things and the land side. Evolving Wilds, Fabled Passage, nurturing peatland, because we do want to sacrifice our lands off at some stage to get benefits and then replay them if we can. Path of Ancestry, because we have a lot of insects. We also get a little bit of scrying going on. Riveteer's Outlook to go and find a swamp or a forest. The usual selection, Terramorphic Expanse. I have included 3 Tree City, another card that in paper is really expensive. On MTGO it's not too bad. Obviously you choose insect for this and hopefully you get a whole load of mana to help yourself out. And then Urborg's in, Verdant Catacombs, and somewhere down the bottom here, Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, along with all the other lands you'd expect to see in a green and black deck. And that's it. That is my take on Zask, the Skittering Swarmlord. As I said, it's going to be a bit of an irregular series. It depends when Daybreak actually add more commanders in for us. But if there is any commanders that have been added in recently that you can't find here on the YouTube channel, let me know down below in the comments. I can always try and fit them in. It gives me a backlog to do. I'm aware of that. But, there's a backlog commander playlist. No, this is the first one. So, yeah, let me know in the comments. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you've not been here before. If you've got any cheers left for the week, please cheer for the video. Help me beat the YouTube algorithm. And I'll be back next week carrying on with maybe some Avatar stuff, some other bits and pieces. But for now, thanks for watching. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.